In this video, you will discover how to pronounce words written in Greek characters. Along the way, we're going to meet vowels and diphthongs and breathing marks and accents. We will also discover that a byproduct of the skill of transliteration is that you will naturally make progress in learning how to pronounce Greek words. Hi, Rob McIver here. Let's begin by considering the two main approaches that have been taken to pronouncing words from New Testament and Classical Greek. There are two broad approaches on how we should pronounce words found in the Greek New Testament and in Classical Greek. The first uses modern Greek as a guide. And this has a real advantage because if you visit Greece, you'll be better prepared to hear the words that are being said to you in the local language. It has a huge disadvantage though, because it's not a particularly good guide to how the word is spelt. In fact, it is particularly poor in indicating to beginners what vowels are being used. This should not surprise us because English is notorious with some words being spelled quite differently than they are pronounced. Because of this, most teachers of New Testament Greek and Classical Greek use a convention that enables the student to work out how a word is spelt from how the word is pronounced. Now, in learning to pronounce Greek words in this way, we'll be looking at the individual sounds of each letter, of each vowel, and combinations of vowels like diphthongs, of breathing marks, and of accents. Let's look at each one of those in turn. Let's begin with the sound of each letter. Now, the basic rule of alphabets is the name of the letter conveys the sound in its first sound. Alpha, so the first sound is a. Beta, first sound is a b. Gamma, g, and so on through the list. And you can see on the table I have showing on the screen here, there is a column which has the sound a, b, g, as in get, it's a hard G, d, e, as in met, it's a short e, z, eta is a long E. Fate is the typical word that we use to say what the sound is or illustrate what the sound is. Th and thin, iopa, most of these are reasonably straightforward. Coming down to loch, the h sound is a little bit aspirated, and ps for psi, and omega is a long O sound. So remember we've got the short E and the long E. Short E is epsilon, e as in met, or long E, which is fate, A as in fate, and omicron, O, and omega, O. Now here's one of the interesting things is when we have a gamma by itself, it's a hard G. But when we have it in combination with itself as a gamma-gamma, it makes an ng sound. So angelos is alpha, gamma-gamma. Angelos. Oh, by the way, that word means angel. Hardly surprising, is it? There are 7 vowels in Greek. Alpha, epsilon, eta, iota, omicron, upsilon, and omega. Sometimes these are found in combinations, which form one sound. The ancient Greeks called these diphthongs. Now there's some debate amongst modern grammarians as to whether that's the exact right word, but seeing as the ancients used it, I'm going to call them diphthongs. And here is a list of the diphthongs found in New Testament Greek. We have alpha iota, pronounced as I in isle. Okay, let's confess here. I grew up in New Zealand, I've lived in Australia, I've studied in America, been back often enough, so my accent is, well, international you could call it. Follow the way your teacher recommends that you should pronounce these words. Well, or use this guide. Alpha, upsilon is ow, as in Faust. Epsilon iota is A, as in veil. Or some people prefer to say I, as in height. Note that it's epsilon iota. We will find some words that go iota epsilon, and that is not a diphthong. That's two separate vowel sounds. Omicron iota is pronounced as oil, oi, in boil. Omicron upsilon is pronounced as oo in group. Upsilon iota is pronounced as ui in quit. Let's move on to accents. Modern Greek gets by with just one accent. Classical and New Testament Greek has three accents. They have an acute accent, a circumflex accent, and a grave accent. Difference between an acute accent and grave accent is one that you might be able to pull off. An acute accent means the voice goes up. A grave accent means the voice comes down. Greeks speak very quickly, and so how to hear a circumflex accent is very challenging, let alone how to say one. The voice is supposed to go up and down on the one vowel. A modern Greek writer has gone so far as to say non-Greeks are never going to be able to get more than just an acute accent to work. And I'm taking their advice. Now, I have some examples of the different kinds of accents here from words that are found in early vocabularies in many Greek textbooks. Take, for example, the acute accents found on Petros. You will see the accent is on the epsilon, and we accent it, we stress that syllable, Petros. Theos, Christos. Christos means Christ, Petros means Peter. Therapeuo. Well, there we have an accent on the second vowel of a diphthong. For a circumflex accent, and I'm sorry, you won't be able to hear my voice go up and down even though I might try, we have doulos, tu, and tois. And for a grave accent, I have two examples there. Theos, Christos. Now you will tell me, but Rob, you just gave me those as an example of an acute accent. Well, sometimes they go from acute to grave, and we will cover that in a later video. Breathing marks are quite important. Here is an interesting fact and an important fact. Every Greek word in the New Testament that begins with a vowel has a breathing mark. They come in two varieties. We have a rough breathing mark and a smooth breathing mark. A rough breathing mark you can see illustrated with the breathing mark over the letter eta. In fact, that is found just like that 982 times in the New Testament, and it means the. You'll notice the mark on the vowel goes forward. A smooth breathing mark, also found on eta, goes the other way. Now the rough breathing mark is a h sound. So if it's over an eta, it sounds like hey. A smooth breathing mark, well, I can't hear the difference. The ancient Greeks thought they heard a sort of sound before the vowel was pronounced. And so they said, well, we need one of those as well. It is just a. So the difference between hey and a is a rough breathing mark versus a smooth breathing mark. Now I've got some examples of words which use rough and smooth breathing marks. For example, Abraham starts with a smooth breathing mark. It's on a capital letter and you will see it's written right next to it. Now, there are two different ways that Jerusalem is spelled in the New Testament, and you can see that they are used about equally often. One starts with a rough breathing mark and one starts with a smooth breathing mark. Remember when we're talking about diphthongs, I emphasized that epsilon iota was a diphthong, but iota epsilon was not. So the breathing mark goes with the first vowel here. So let me see if I get this right. Hierusoluma versus Jerusalem. Isn't that interesting? Rough breathing mark versus smooth breathing mark. We have Jesus, we have Israel, we have Ioannis. And for examples of some rough breathing marks, we have Hurisco, and here we have epsilon upsilon, which is a diphthong. So the breathing mark goes on the second vowel. Chrema, that's a challenge, isn't it? A H and a R sound together. Chrema. And an interesting bit of trivia. Every word in the New Testament that begins with rho has a rough breathing mark on it. And the last word there, huios. Huios. Again, it's a diphthong, and so the breathing mark is found on the second vowel. Now let's apply all that we've learned about the sound of each letter, sound of vowels, the sound of diphthongs, the sound of accents, and the sound of breathing marks to some words that are found commonly in the Greek New Testament. These words happen to be found in Vocabulary 1 from New Testament Greek Made Easier, but you'll find them in most early vocabularies of a Greek textbook. Let's look at the word individually. The first word there begins with a alpha, capital Alpha, because it's the name of an individual. And you will know that the word alpha begins with a sound, so that's a. The next letter is b, beta, a b sound. Ab. The next letter is ro, an r sound. Abra. Then there is two alepphs together. Now this is a little bit strange, but this is because this is not actually a Greek word, it is a Hebrew word. And you probably know that there's a secret aleph in there if you've studied Hebrew. You don't need to know that. So it goes abra, and then the last letter is a mu. So it's a sound. Abraham. The next word begins with a capital delta. D. Then an alpha for a, but it's a diphthong, so it's alpha upsilon, ow. And then an iota, a I sound, or an S sound, it can be either. And then a delta, which is a dis sound, Dawid. And surprisingly enough, the first word, Abraham, is the name of a person, Abraham. And the second word, Dawid, is the name of a person, the name of David. Theos, so there's a theta, which is a th sound. And you're getting the habit, you're getting the pattern, aren't you? Theos, that means God. And that should be no surprise either, because we know words like theology mean the study of God. Theocracy means God rules, essentially. It means that the priestly class is in charge. I've already shared how to say Hierusoluma and Jerusalem, the two ways that Jerusalem is spelled in the New Testament. Then we have Jesus, Yisrael. In fact, it's probably a good idea if I say the word and you repeat it back. Let's do that together. Remember, hearing and saying are using more senses, and so it's helping you learn the word. Abraham, Dawid, Theos, Hierusoluma, Jerusalem, Jesus, Israel, Ioannis, Maria, Miriam, Petros, and Christos. By the way, Mary was a very common word in the time of the New Testament. In fact, we know several different Marys from the New Testament itself. So we've got Mary Magdalene, we've got Mary the mother of Jesus, Mary the wife of Clopas, etc. So Mary, Maria, is a Greek word, and Miriam is the Hebrew equivalent. The next thing I want to talk about is transliteration. By the way, that's going to be one of the things that make learning how to say Greek words easier. I'll get to those tips in a moment. Transliteration is the process of using English characters to write Greek words. And here I have a table which shows the list of English letters that are used to represent Greek letters. And you can see most of them make sense. An alpha, which is an A sound, is represented by an English A character. A beta is represented by an English B, a gamma by a G, and so on. There's a couple of tricky bits. Some of them have two letters, like TH for theta, but the biggest difference is the two kinds of E. We have epsilon and we have eta. So the short E is just an English E, and eta is an E with a bar across the top. We have something similar happening with Omicron. Omicron itself is just a regular English O, letter O. But omega, if you look right down the bottom there, is O with a bar over it. Now, writing a E character with a bar over it, or an O character with a bar over it, is not a problem if you're using a pen and you're writing on a piece of paper. But where do you find these things on a keyboard for a PC or a laptop? Well, there is a way that always works. It's a bit slow and cumbersome, but on both a Mac and a PC, if you're using Microsoft Word, you go to the Insert function, Insert menu, and choose Symbol, and if you look long enough, you'll eventually find an E with a bar over it and an O with a bar over it, and you can use those to insert. Now, there are some shortcuts that you can use if you are using a Mac or if you're using a PC. On a Mac, if you hold the key down in a certain way, it will give you options. For example, if you hold the key for E down, you will see an E with a bar over it as one of the options. On a PC, there is a shortcut on a PC if you have a full keyboard. This means a keyboard with a number pad. Unfortunately, most laptops lack the number pad. Now, if you're wanting to type an E with a bar over it, what you do is you press the alternate key down and hold it, and then you type 275 on the number pad and then let the Alt key off. There you go. That produces an E with a bar over it. If you're wanting an O with a bar over it, you press the Alt key down, you type 333 on the number pad, then you let the Alt key off, and that will produce a lowercase o with a bar over it. We are now in a position where I can share with you my tips for making it easier to pronounce Greek words. My first tip is to thoroughly memorize the alphabet. Easily done. You just practice it, writing it out till you can do it. Remember, the name of the letter of the alphabet gives you the sound of the letter. The next tip is to, as often as you can, read Greek words out loud. So when you're looking at the vocabulary, you don't say to yourself, you say out loud, Abraham. You hear it. as well as see it, and you feel it in your mouth. Languages are spoken events after all, and your brain is designed to learn what it hears. My third tip is to find an exercise involving transliteration. There is such an exercise in chapter 1 of the book Beginning New Testament Greek Made Easier. And here it is. First of all, it asks you to look at this Greek sentence and then transliterate it. So what does that mean? It means write it out in characters that are English letters rather than Greek letters, following the conventions that we've just been talking about. So the first word there begins with a capital chi, which in English is a capital K, followed by an alpha, which is in English represented by an A letter. An iota is represented by an English I. Next word is autos. Again, alpha is written with an English A. Upsilon is written with an English U. Tau is written with an English T. Omicron is written with an English O. And sigma is written with an English S. The next word is a bit interesting. It is ain. It begins with an eta. So we transliterate that with an E with a bar over it. And then a nu is a N. Well, you get the point. Now, in the textbook itself, there is a complete answer to these questions. This exercise also asks you to go the other way, starting with a sentence that has been transliterated and writing the Greek original. So let's look at the words. Yes, I. So that's a I, which represents an iota. Now, it's an iota epsilon. Remember, that is not a diphthong, so the word starting with a vowel has to have a breathing mark. It's a smooth breathing mark, and it goes in front of the capital iota. The letter E represents epsilon. The letter S is sigma, followed by another sigma, an alpha, and an iota. Now, da is delta epsilon, and egenason is epsilon, gamma, epsilon, nu, and what is the E with a bar over it? Why, that is an eta. You get the idea. The experience of my students has been that by the time they've finished doing this particular exercise in transliteration, they have pretty much mastered the Greek alphabet. And they've made a good start on how to pronounce Greek words as well. This has been part of a series of videos relating to the Greek alphabet. There is another series of videos which deals with the Greek Polytonic Keyboard, the standard way to type Classical and New Testament Greek into a PC or a computer. You can most easily find these videos by either subscribing to my YouTube channel at NT Greek Made Easier, or by following me on x.com at McIver 2024. These videos on the Greek alphabet and the Greek Polytonic Keyboard follow Chapter 1 and Chapter 2 of my textbook, Beginning New Testament Greek Made Easier. Now, let me just say that if you've watched the videos on the alphabet, and if you've done the exercise, you probably will have mastered the Greek alphabet and be a long way along in learning to pronounce Greek words from the New Testament. And hey, if you found this video useful, why not let me know by either clicking on the like button below or by clicking on the heart icon. Thank you.